There's life here, but not as we know it. Alien-like creatures produce dazzling displays of light. Down here, in this blackness, creatures live beyond the normal rules of time. Siphonophores are virtually eternal.
Deep beneath the Pacific, a man named Drake Sullivan peers into the darkness where no sunlight reaches. He doesn't just explore the ocean, he hunts secrets hidden for millions of years. Hours ago, his team spotted something strange on the seafloor, something that could shift the balance of power across the world. It wasn't the first anomaly, but this one felt different. Shadows moved in patterns that made Drake's heart race. Was it alive? Or just the ocean playing tricks? The deeper he went, the more the weight of the water seemed to press on his chest, and every signal on the screen whispered of a discovery bigger than anything anyone imagined. History will remember this dive, but only if the world sees what Drake is about to uncover. Stay with us, because what lies at the bottom of the Mariana Trench might rewrite the future itself.
The world's oceans don't go any deeper than the Pacific's Mariana Trench.
The descent into the unknown. Drake Sullivan had always believed the ocean was humanity's final frontier. Not space, not towering mountains, but the crushing black of the Mariana Trench, a place where pressure could flatten a submarine and darkness stretched farther than the eye or any camera could see. He gripped the controls of his submersible, feeling the slight tremor of the vessel beneath him, as if the ocean itself was testing his resolve. The water above shimmered faintly at first, pale blues and greens from sunlight trickling down. But the familiar colors quickly faded into gray, then near black. Each meter deeper pressed on the sub like 1,000 invisible hands, as though the sea was determined to remind him that humans did not belong here. Drake thought about history. In 1960, then Jacques Picard and Don Walsh had squeezed into a tiny metal sphere, descending into the Challenger Deep. They touched the ocean floor for barely 20 minutes, yet the pressure above them was beyond comprehension, over 1,000 times the air we breathe. Drake smiled grimly, adjusting the cameras. At least they had courage, he muttered, remembering the stories of that mission. Unlike them, he and his team had modern instruments, sensors, and a reinforced vessel. But the feeling of vulnerability never left him. Every descent reminded him that the trench was alive with danger, a silent force capable of swallowing even the best-prepared explorers. The sonar pinged, flashing strange markings across the screen. Curved lines, irregular patterns, and even depressions that looked like they had been dug intentionally. Drake's heart raced. Could this be natural formations or something else entirely? Shadows drifted past, ghost-like plumes of sediment swirling slowly, sometimes shaped like creatures, sometimes like machines that didn't belong. Every flicker of light from the submersible's lamps created 1,000 questions. Nothing like this had ever been reported before, and Drake knew that whatever was down here could change everything. The deeper they went, the more surreal it became. Temperature dropped steadily, hovering just above freezing. Sunlight vanished completely within minutes, leaving only the narrow beams from the submersible to cut through the pitch-black water. The pressure was relentless, squeezing at every inch of metal, testing every weld and sensor. One mistake could end the mission instantly. And yet, humans are drawn to extremes. The challenge, the mystery, the potential for discovery. This was why Drake had chosen this life. He had descended more than 10,900 meters, where the ocean floor felt closer than the stars above and yet completely alien. Each dive felt like entering another planet. The trench itself is vast, over 2,500 kilometers long, wider than any canyon on land, and deeper than Mount Everest is tall, but the bottom is a narrow, hidden world.
A desperate rush to rescue hundreds of hikers stuck near the world's tallest mountain.
Almost claustrophobic in its isolation. Every ridge, every crevice could conceal life or resources, secrets that the world above could barely imagine. Drake realized something important. This place was more than mysterious. It was strategic. Whoever understood the trench first would not just control minerals or biological specimens, they could control knowledge, technology, and power. Every discovery, every sample, every grain of sediment had potential consequences for nations, industries, and the future of science. Drake exhaled slowly, staring at the endless dark ahead. The trench seemed to stretch infinitely, a labyrinth of pressure, darkness, and possibility. The ocean was testing him, daring him to uncover what it had hidden for millions of years. And Drake Sullivan knew that tonight, on this descent, history might be written not in textbooks, but in the cold, crushing silence of the Mariana Trench. Hidden life beneath darkness. Drake Sullivan leaned closer to the monitor, eyes straining to make sense of the glowing shapes that drifted past his submersible. The Mariana Trench was supposed to be silent, empty, a graveyard at the bottom of the ocean. That was the assumption for centuries. But the reality was entirely different. The life here didn't just exist, it thrived under conditions that would instantly kill almost anything else. As the submersible hovered a few meters above the seabed, strange lights blinked in the darkness. Tiny bioluminescent creatures, some no larger than a fingertip, flashed like stars in the black abyss. Then, something bigger moved. The ghostly outline of a Hadal snailfish gliding effortlessly over the mud, its semi-transparent body revealing a skeleton of soft cartilage. The pressure here, over 1,100 times the atmosphere at sea level, would crush a human body instantly. Yet these creatures had adapted perfectly. Drake's hands hovered over the controls, heart pounding, knowing he was witnessing something almost no human had ever seen. It wasn't just fish. Drake's instruments detected microbial colonies embedded in the sediment, the genetic material of life completely new to science. Some of these microbes had an astonishing ability. They could repair their own DNA constantly, like a microscopic army of mechanics, keeping their genetic code intact under extreme stress. Others could consume toxic chemicals, substances humans considered lethal, and turn them into energy. The trench wasn't a desert, it was a hidden laboratory of evolution. Drake remembered reading reports from the MIR project, a Chinese-led expedition that had collected thousands of sediment samples from extreme depths. Their analysis revealed nearly 90% of microbes discovered were unknown to science. The Mariana Trench, once thought barren, was in fact a vault of life.
The harshest environment in the world is the deep ocean, and it's unforgiving, as I said, and going down there is always a risk.
A treasure chest of adaptation and survival. And now, Drake was seeing it with his own eyes. In a flash of movement caught his attention, a giant amphipod, almost the length of a human foot, scuttling across the mud. Its oversized legs and massive claws moved with precision, scavenging anything edible that drifted down from above. Drake had seen videos of these creatures before, but seeing one alive in its natural environment was a different experience entirely. The amphipod didn't just survive, it dominated. A predator perfectly suited to the abyss. Every flicker of bioluminescent light hinted at unseen ecosystems, creatures interacting silently, a complex food web existing in complete isolation. The genetic codes of these microbes were like a blueprint for resilience. If studied carefully, they could inspire new medicines to repair human cells, super-strong materials resistant to pressure, or even technologies for space exploration. Yet the wonder was tinged with unease. This ecosystem had survived untouched for millions of years, and here he was, intruding with his machines and lights. Every movement of the submersible stirred sediment clouds that could linger for kilometers, potentially smothering fragile creatures. Drake knew the trench wasn't just a scientific frontier, it was fragile, and humanity was stepping into a world it barely understood. As he adjusted the lights to illuminate a patch of sediment, tiny worms and bacteria moved with surprising coordination, feeding and repairing the environment almost like a self-sustaining city. Drake felt a mix of awe and responsibility. It didn't swim like a fish, but glided, almost floating. Drake's pulse quickened. Could it be an unknown predator, or a larger, intelligent species yet undiscovered? And the trench had kept its deepest secrets for eons, and tonight it seemed ready to reveal at least a glimpse. Drake Sullivan exhaled slowly, knowing this moment would stay with him forever. Every dive into the trench was a lesson. Life could exist in ways humans hadn't imagined. Adaptation was limitless, and the potential locked in this dark, remote world was staggering. The Mariana Trench wasn't simply a place to explore, it was a teacher, showing the resilience of life, the power of nature, and the consequences of human curiosity. In that crushing darkness, Drake realized the truth. The trench was not just a deep scar in the Earth's crust. It was a hidden universe, full of life, secrets, and possibilities that could rewrite what humanity thought it knew about biology, survival, and the limits of the possible. The power and resources. Drake Sullivan watched the submersible drift slowly over the trench floor, its lights revealing patches of strange rocks and mineral formations. These weren't just ordinary stones, they were polymetallic nodules, scattered like hidden treasure across the mud. Inside them lay metals crucial for modern technology: cobalt, nickel, copper, and manganese. The very metals powering electric cars, smartphones, and renewable energy grids. Here, at the bottom of the ocean, humanity's next century of energy and technology could be quietly waiting. He tapped the controls, zooming in on a cluster of nodules. They looked harmless, potato-sized lumps, but each one was a vault of potential wealth. The trench's crushing pressure, frigid temperatures, and delicate ecosystems meant that any mining operation could have disastrous consequences.
The deep seabed may at first appear lifeless, but it's home to a unique caste of mud dwellers, the sea toad.
One wrong move, and machines designed to collect the nodules could churn the seabed into suffocating clouds of sediment, wiping out life that had survived untouched for millions of years. Drake's mind drifted to the implications. Whoever mastered the extraction of these resources first could control not just metals, but the technologies they would enable. The Mariana Trench wasn't merely a biological treasure trove. It was a strategic gold mine, a chessboard where nations could gain unimaginable advantage if they played their moves carefully. And it wasn't only minerals. Methane hydrates, sometimes called fire ice, glimmered faintly beneath the mud. But with that promise came enormous danger. Disturb the seabed carelessly, and huge plumes of methane, a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide, could escape into the ocean and atmosphere, triggering climate chaos that humans were only beginning to understand. Drake shivered at the thought. Every mission here was a balance between discovery and destruction. The submersible's cameras picked up something else: strange clusters of microbial mats, glowing faintly, almost like alien gardens. Scientists believed their unique abilities could hold the key to new medicines, DNA repair technologies, and industrial innovations. Imagine enzymes that repair damaged cells under extreme conditions, or proteins resistant to pressure technologies inspired by the trench could redefine medicine, material science, and even space travel. Drake realized that the Mariana Trench held more than resources, it held knowledge. Whoever understood these organisms first would hold the blueprint for breakthroughs humanity hadn't dreamed possible. The implications for global power were staggering. Companies, governments, and private explorers alike were racing to catalog these species, sequence their DNA, and claim patents before anyone else could. Every dive, every sample, every grain of mud could tip the balance in this silent high-stakes competition. As Drake hovered above a cluster of nodules, he noticed subtle shifts in the sediment. Tiny amphipods and snailfish scurried among the rocks.
A new type of smiling fish has been discovered. It's officially called a snailfish, and scientists say that unlike most deep-sea creatures,
Oblivious to the massive metal cylinder hovering above them. He felt a pang of guilt that these creatures had survived the abyss for millions of years, yet humans were intruding, seeking metals and knowledge that could reshape the world. He knew the line between exploration and exploitation was thin, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore. The trench whispered its secrets cautiously, revealing just enough to hint at its potential. Drake's team had barely scratched the surface. With every meter deeper, every nodule collected, every microbial sample cataloged, the stakes rose. The Mariana Trench wasn't just a deep scar in the ocean floor, it was a gateway. A gateway to power, wealth, and discovery. Those who reached it first, who understood its balance, who respected its fragility while mastering its resources, would hold the keys to the future. Drake leaned back, absorbing the enormity of it all. Here, in total darkness, under pressures that could crush mountains, life thrived, secrets waited, and nations were silently competing for advantage. The Mariana Trench was no longer just a place for scientists. It was the epicenter of a new kind of global power. And tonight, Drake Sullivan was on the front lines, witnessing it all. The international race. Drake Sullivan's eyes flicked across the monitor as lines of data scrolled by. The Mariana Trench wasn't just a scientific playground, it was the newest arena of global strategy. Around the world, nations were quietly racing to stake their claim on this hidden frontier, each with different goals, but the same unspoken understanding. Whoever controlled the trench would wield influence over the next century of power. China was the first to establish a serious presence. Their submersible, Fendua, had already completed dozens of dives, collecting samples, mapping the terrain, and testing autonomous robotic systems. This wasn't just exploration, it was building dominance. Drake realized the significance immediately. If China could create a permanent, scalable operation here, they wouldn't just be the first, they'd be setting the rules for everyone else. Meanwhile, the United States had chosen a different approach. Their focus was on open research and preservation. Submersibles from the EV Nautilus and other programs broadcast their dives live.
And watching the urgent search for the OceanGate Titan submersible.
So many things that can happen to you down at that depth.
Cataloging species, sediment, and water chemistry while inviting international scientists to participate. Drake admired the methodical planning. The Americans weren't just collecting resources, they were creating a database, a knowledge hub, and a scientific map for the global community. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that open access had its own risks. Once the discoveries were public, nations with industrial capacity could exploit them faster than anyone could regulate. Russia and Japan were also quietly active. Russia had decades of oceanographic experience and a fleet of submersibles, while Japan had mapped vast portions of the deep sea, collecting extensive biological and geological data. Drake noted that these countries weren't in a flashy competition, they were quietly preparing for a long game, understanding that the trench's secrets wouldn't be won overnight. Private players were changing the dynamics, too. Private capital allowed rapid innovation, and some of these missions had capabilities far beyond traditional fleets. Drake realized the stakes weren't just national, they were corporate. Whoever combined technology, speed, and insight could potentially outmaneuver entire nations. And Drake's thoughts turned back to the trench floor below. Every nodule, every microbial mat, every strange creature was a potential game changer. The competition wasn't just about metals or energy sources, it was about biology, technology, and strategy combined. Deep-sea microbes that could repair their DNA under crushing pressure weren't just curiosities. They were tools that could revolutionize medicine or materials science. Knowledge here equaled power in the most direct sense. He paused as a shadow passed across the screen, a slow-moving giant of the abyss. Even in the midst of a geopolitical contest, the trench retained its mysteries. No amount of planning could fully prepare for what might emerge from this alien world. Drake felt a shiver run down his spine. The deeper humans went, the more unpredictable the consequences became. And Drake also understood that the race wasn't about speed alone. It was about patience, strategy, and respect for the environment. The Mariana Trench was unforgiving. A single mistake, crushing a delicate microbial mat, stirring a sediment cloud, or mismanaging the submersible could erase decades of work and destroy ecosystems that had evolved over millions of years. Yet the potential rewards were staggering. Whoever controlled access to this knowledge and these resources could dominate the next wave of energy, technology, and medical breakthroughs. The trench had become a chessboard, with every country and corporation maneuvering carefully. Moves were slow, deliberate, and measured, but the implications were enormous. A patent on a microbe capable of repairing human cells under extreme conditions could be worth billions. That control over polymetallic nodules could determine who builds the batteries of tomorrow. Whoever mastered both biology and minerals would hold unprecedented leverage. Drake Sullivan felt the weight of it all as he navigated the submersible across a ridge of glowing sediment. The Mariana Trench wasn't just a remote canyon at the bottom of the Pacific. It was now a strategic frontier, a place where the future of power, technology, and science converged. Nations and corporations weren't just exploring, they were silently plotting, testing, and preparing to claim dominion over a world almost entirely invisible to the public eye. Hidden threats. Drake Sullivan's submersible hovered silently above the trench floor.
We learned about this missing submersible, and now just such a terrible end to this search.
The lights illuminated a world that had survived untouched for millions of years. Delicate microbial mats, strange snailfish, and towering shrimp-like amphipods. But as he studied the terrain, a sinking feeling settled in his chest. The Mariana Trench was a fragile kingdom, and humans had already left a mark. It started subtly. A tangle of sediment stirred by an earlier dive floated like smoke, drifting across the abyss. Each plume could smother creatures that had adapted to survive under extreme pressure, cold, and darkness. Drake remembered reading the reports that one mining operation could wipe out entire communities, potentially erasing species before they were even discovered. The trench didn't recover quickly. Growth here took decades, sometimes centuries. Every action mattered. Then there were the plastics. Even at depths exceeding 10,900 meters, fragments of human waste drifted past. Drake paused the submersible's camera on a tiny bag, twisted and worn, lying in the mud. It seemed impossible here. In the deepest, most remote part of the world, the footprint of humanity had arrived. Microplastics were being ingested by deep-sea creatures, entering a food web that had evolved over millions of years. These animals, masters of survival, now faced a new challenge: pollution they couldn't escape. Chemical contamination added another layer of danger. Decades-old banned substances like PCBs were detected in shrimp-like amphipods and other trench inhabitants. They had traveled through ocean currents, settling silently into this dark kingdom. Drake shivered at the thought. Here was a place that had evolved for resilience, yet humans were testing its limits in ways no natural force ever had. Drake thought about the methane hydrates scattered across the seabed. And they were potential energy treasures, yet extracting them carelessly could trigger violent underwater landslides. Massive plumes of methane could escape into the water and atmosphere, accelerating climate change in ways impossible to predict. Every discovery.
We spend a great deal of time looking at the impact of climate change and how it's changing our weather and environment.
Every resource came with a silent warning: Power here carried responsibility, and the consequences of mistakes were enormous. The trench's fragility contrasted sharply with the ambitions of nations and corporations racing to exploit it. China's robotic fleets crawled across sections of the floor, mapping and sampling, while American teams focused on research and preservation. Private explorers collected valuable data for profit. Drake realized the irony. The very pressure, darkness, and cold that created this unique environment also made it extraordinarily vulnerable. A single misstep could undo millennia of evolution. He remembered a story from a recent expedition. Dawn Wright, an oceanographer, had descended into the Challenger Deep only to spot a beer bottle resting quietly on the mud. A simple, human object, yet a symbol of how far our reach extended. If a bottle could reach the deepest ocean floor, what hope did the creatures have against fleets of machines or chemical plumes? Drake's mind raced. This was more than exploration. It was a moral test. How could humans balance discovery, resource collection, and preservation when the consequences were so invisible, yet so permanent? Even as the submersible moved forward, small currents carried fine sediment clouds across the lights. Microbial mats shimmered faintly beneath the drifting dust. Drake noted how quickly life here reacted, as adapting in subtle ways to survive. But he also realized that these adaptations had limits. Too much disturbance, and the ecosystem would collapse silently, leaving no trace for decades. It was a fragile web, and humanity was the strongest, most unpredictable force in it. The Mariana Trench whispered warnings in its dark silence. It showed Drake its beauty, its power, and its vulnerability. Every dive revealed life, every sample contained knowledge, and every resource hinted at potential. But it also reminded him that this world was not invincible. Pollution, over-extraction, and ignorance could destroy it. The stakes were higher than anyone could imagine, not just for science or resources, but for the balance of the planet itself. The Mariana Trench is no longer a silent, untouched abyss. It is alive, full of life, resources, and secrets that could change the course of humanity. Every dive uncovers new mysteries, new potential, and new dangers. What Drake Sullivan and his team have found could reshape technology, medicine, and global power. But the trench reminds us that even the smallest action can have enormous consequences. Pollution, mining, and reckless exploration could destroy centuries of evolution in moments. The choices we make now will define the future, whether humanity learns to explore responsibly or repeats past mistakes. The deepest place on Earth is teaching us lessons about survival, strategy, and stewardship. What lies at the bottom could change everything, but only if we pay attention. Comment your thoughts below and stay with us as we continue to reveal the secrets of the Mariana Trench.